Kevin. I'm sure you've already heard this once this morning. I'm going to be passing around the evaluation forms. Make sure you circle on the left which session you're in. And then it tells you over here on at the top on the evaluation scale, the list over here on the right. And then if you have any additional comments, feel free to put those in on the bottom. That's how the conference staff maintains hopefully a good conference for you, and also they will make improvements every time. My name is Isaac Wolbert. I'm the moderator for this session. I'm state economist for USDA NRCS here in West Virginia. Without further ado, I'm going to bring you the next hour. We'll have Mr. Brad Smith, who is an extension agent for WVU, and also director of the Small Ruminant Project. And I think I've known Brad for quite a while. If I'm not mistaken, Brad's been in Grant County area since 89? Yeah. 1989. So, and then director of the Small Ruminant Project since 2006. So that's, he's spent about half of his time working with producers, sheep and meat goat industry on that. He has expertise in livestock production and evaluation, feedback programs, environmental stewardship. Has a depth of passion for providing producers with necessary tools to improve efficiency and profitability of livestock enterprises. So, with that, bring Brad Smith. Let's give him our full attention. And hopefully, if you could, now he wants any other questions, I'll let him take care of that. If we have questions during the session, we'll go through. Brad?
We can go ahead and ask questions as we go. When they asked me to come talk today, they asked me to cover both selection and management. And management just kind of opens it up to talk about anything. We're going to focus on selection first and see how our time goes. But as we... You okay? Good. As we go through this, if you have questions, please ask. If we start getting pushed for time, we'll change and hold it to the end. The resources for this presentation, of course, the Bible for sheep production is the SID handbook from the American Sheep Industry Association, and then the best small ruminant website is the Maryland Sheep and Goat page that Susan Shanian maintains. There's a lot of excellent resources on there. If you haven't found that, that's one thing you can benefit from. Also from the American Sheep Industry Association. We're going to talk about selection first. The one thing we've got a lot of catching up with, both sheep and goats. In the sheep industry, percent lamb crop, lambing rate hasn't changed for a long, long time. It hadn't changed much even back in the early 1900s. Numbers continue to go down. Numbers of lambs produced continue to go down in the United States. Others are making progress. Beef cattle numbers are going down, prices are up, but we're still producing more beef each year. When we continue to do the same thing over and over, how can we expect to change results? So we've got to start looking at some opportunities to make some changes. When we think about genetic selection, first thing that we need to do is make sure we have a breed that fits our resources and what we're trying to do. If you're trying to sell club lambs to FFA students and 4-H members, you don't want a hair sheep. If you're trying to be pasture-based with limited inputs then there's so many breed resources out there. Choose the right breed, make it fit what you want to do and what you're trying to market. When we talk about the management part of it a little bit, we'll mention the marketing and developing a business plan that affects choosing the right breed to begin with. Plan your market, develop your production system, fit that market and your resources, and use the breeds that are appropriate. The one thing that I wanted to bring out here is the breeds are noted for all their various traits, but there's as much variation within breed as there is across breeds. So don't assume that every individual in that breed will or won't work in your situation. Crossbreeding is one thing that is often forgotten about. The hybrid vigor, the heterosis that we get from crossbreeding needs to be utilized in our production system. That systematic utilization of those resources to produce progeny of a specific type will provide those superior offspring to either parent when we have that hybrid vigor. Think about breed complementarity in our crossbreeding systems. One thing that works awfully well in the mountainous region of West Virginia for a lot of our producers are those model-based lambs. That Suffolk Dorset cross lamb do very well in the pastures in the mountains. This is some old data out of the SID manual, but it's very, very useful. Just the heterosis effect. If we get down here to weight of lamb weaned per ewe exposed, we have a crossbred ewe, we can gain 18% pound of lamb weaned. When we talk about seed stock selection, choose that breed or those breeds that are going to fit your environment. Choose the environment that you want to produce in, and then look for a producer that matches that system. You can't go to these shows and sales and buy lambs that will push on grain and expect them to thrive when you turn them out on grass and don't want to put any more inputs into it. So you've got to find that producer that has some of the same objectives you do. Health management is critical as well. Dr. Browdridge mentioned in this morning's talk that most of our diseases and now resistant parasites are bought and paid for. We bring them into our operations ourselves. And then finally, begin to choose individual animals that you want to select. Some economically important traits that we should be considering for performance data. Of course, the maternal traits, fertility, prolificacy, lamb survival. Dr. NSIP has said for years that fertility affects profitability more than anything. And in most situations, it does affect profitability more than anything. So we need to be concerned about those maternal traits. Parasite resistance and resilience, Dr. Bowden's talked about. We can select animals, both sheep and goats, for parasite resistance. Growth rate, we've got the performance test station where we test both rams and bucks. We started a fall test this year. It's being conducted here in Morgantown for fall-born lambs, where we're evaluating growth rate and feed efficiency. Carcass merit, we'll begin to look at some of that data as well as we ultrasound those rams. We'll measure back that ribeye area or loin depth, and then can calculate boneless closely trimmed retail cuts. Leg circumference is something that goat industry measures and needs to be concerned about. One thing we really haven't worried about with sheep and goats, and maybe someday we'd be more of a concern, is the quality of that meat. We need to start selecting for meat quality. Our tools for genetic improvement, on-farm performance testing. You keep some records yourself. Get some weaning weights. Get some post-weaning gains. Of course, the maternal traits, the only way we're going to measure and be able to improve those is with some on-farm performance testing. If we go all the way down to the last one, the NSIP program, if we submit that data to a national program, we can even have more useful tool to use for selection. Central performance test stations I mentioned, progeny testing, not much progeny testing going on, but certainly one of the best ways to make some genetic improvement. NSIP, the National Sheep Improvement Program's mission is to provide predictable, economically important genetic evaluation information in the American sheep industry and goat industry now by converting those on-farm performance records into relevant decision-making tools. NSIP is a nonprofit developed by U.S. sheep industry. It has a volunteer board of directors, represents all meat, all breeds, all purebred animals. So our commercial producers can't directly use NSIP, but they hopefully will be selecting some of those purebred animals, bringing into their operation that have EBVs calculated on them. And we'll talk about the EBVs in a minute. Cooperative agreement now with Sheep Genetics in Australia. It calculates all the data, and NSIP coordinates the U.S. part of the program. Sheep Genetics produced EBVs, estimated breeding values. We're getting used to EPDs, expected progeny difference. Well, EBVs are just a step to get there, and they're very, very similar. They're a prediction of the offspring's performance compared to other NSIP sheep with a similar breed from the same contemporary group to submit data and make it meaningful. They're based on individual performance of that animal within that contemporary group. They're also based on performance data of any related animal, just like EPDs. So sire and dam and offspring and relatives are all calculated into that progeny to come up with a more accurate selection tool. They're based on related traits like weaning weight, post-weaning weight, correlated traits. So with weaning weight, one thing makes it more difficult for me is everything is in metric system, so we're dealing with kilograms, but I've converted that over. The difference in those two rams is about 11 pounds for weaning weight. This is weaning weight. So we've got a progeny difference, or an EPD value would be about 5.5, half of the EBV. The EBV is the estimated breeding value for that animal, whether it's the dam or the sire. The EPD would be the combination from both parents. Since the parent gives half the genetics to that offspring, progeny difference would be 5.5. With 50 lambs at $2 a pound, that's $550 difference. So certainly a big difference in the value two branches. They calculate EBVs on growth traits, birth weight, weaning weight, maternal weaning weight, is a measure of milk production, post-weaning weight, yearling weight. They also count, collect, or conduct and produce EBVs on reproduction traits, number of lambs born, number of lambs weaned, carcass traits, muscle depth, loin eye measurement. In the United States, we've always measured loin eye area. I still feel that's a better measure than just loin depth, but when we've gone to this international system, we've had to begin to measure muscle depth in the loins. So you can see some of those kind of measures. Fat depth, parasite resistance, with some selection, we can really make a difference in parasite loads and problems. Of course, our wool breeds are interested in wool traits, fleece weight, fiber diameter, staple weight, and each of these are utilized to calculate indexes. These indexes are a combination of all of the various traits that people put together to feel they're important. So most of our sheep in this area are interested in that carcass plus index, growth and carcass measures, or the U.S. hair index, which takes into account parasite resistance. U.S. maternal and U.S. range. The maternal we certainly should be interested in as well. NSIP breeders are making progress. So here you see the genetic change on number of lambs born in 2004, 2013. The cotton, number of lambs born, number of lambs weaned have increased as well. Lambs weaned in polypays, there's a 13-pound difference from 2004, 5, 2013. So genetic trends, these producers that are involved are beginning to make some change. Suffolk sheep, same thing. Weaning weight, post-weaning weight, both have improved over the years. Got a six-pound difference there in post-weaning weight gain. Back fat depth and loin muscle depth. See a square inch increase over almost 10 years selection, but with very limited numbers of animals participating. That's a difference in about $10 in carcass value. Wool data, of course, we can increase quality and quantity of the wool. With the cottons especially, they're interested in weaning worm egg counts from the fecal egg counts Dr. Bowders was talking about. They've shown a 70% reduction in parent statistics. With NSIP, commercial producers hopefully will start asking for some animals with some production data when they need to buy breeding stock and utilize those genetic selection tools. Biosecurity breeders, seed stock producers, hopefully can get enrolled and get involved in the program. It is time consuming. It is another record keeping process. There is a yearly fee to be involved, but right now that's being waived for new producers that sign up. The new producers getting in the program don't have that yearly fee to have EBVs calculated on their animals. For new breeders signing up, they will assign you a mentor from the same breed. They'll provide you free software for data entry. You just have to collect and submit that relevant data. And it's something that's just like EPDs now in the Angus Association. They're processing it continuously. So it's continuously being updated. You can go to the website, you can go directly to Land Plan, or you can go to the NSIP.org, the National Sheep Improvement Program website, and see the genetic trends, the percentile reports on those animals. And then utilize those to help market breeding animals with EBVs, estimated breeding values. Why should we get involved? Increase profits for a commercial producer. As we begin to talk about the management kinds of things, any questions on that first part, selection with Land Plan and EBVs? It's been really slow to get sheep and goat producers involved. You have a comment? Kathy? No? Kathy's one of the producers that's been involved for many years. So, one thing that kind of hurt the industry, we started the U.S. system back in early 2000 time frame and worked on it till about 2011. Then they decided we couldn't maintain that and do that any longer. We went in with Land Plan and kind of changed paths. So that's been a drawback in getting folks signed up. I know it's affected me, being involved. It is very time consuming to record all of the data. But it's our best method of evaluating true genetic potential of those animals. As we begin to talk a little bit about management, all these things need to be considered: business planning, marketing, health, nutrition, genetics, as we plan for profitability and enterprise success. When we think about profit, all too often throughout my career, early on, we always looked at this maximizing profit equals maximum profit model. Now, thank goodness, we're finally beginning to focus more on optimal production and optimal profit. We've got to consider how we can decrease those overhead costs. We really don't have much to do with prices we're going to get paid. We can certainly change the pounds, feed animals longer. We can consider accelerated breeding program and try to get more lamb crops, 2 lamb crops every 3 years. We can do some of those kinds of things. But as we do that, to maximize production, we've got to keep our overhead costs in line and keep an eye on that. Main factors in profitability for both sheep and goats is all too often we don't manage it like the business to begin with. It's a hobby in a lot of cases. And we've got to start managing it like a business. Make decisions based on the economics. maximize the use of pasture or other low-cost feeds, shop around for feed ingredients. You know, when you're buying a 50-pound bag of feed at the store versus buying 100 pounds versus buying a ton at a time, cost changes dramatically. So there's certainly some things you can do there. Be your own vet. You need to work with a vet on your operation, develop a client-patient relationship annually so that you can learn from your vet and begin to treat and take care of the majority of those animal health issues when you're out. Strive to produce 100% lamb and kid crop. We already mentioned fertility, percent lamb crop has the biggest effect on profitability, or one of the biggest effects on profitability in these production systems. You know, we've got a tremendous advantage over people. They, on average, they can't get one calf every year. They're always going to have something. We have shorter generation interval with sheep and goats. We have shorter gestation length. We can look at accelerated breeding, and we have multiple births in them. So we certainly can select for that. Be careful when you're selecting for that, though. Do you really want triplets or quads? Now, as we select for more multiple births, we're going to end up with a higher percentage of triplets or quads as well. Eliminate as many middlemen as possible. We need to keep those production records, but we also need to be concerned about the financial records as well. And then market your product. I know I'm guilty. Probably most of us in this room are. We're more focused on the production side. Got a lot of folks that tell you that you ought to spend as much time marketing your product as you do producing. What is the middleman? If you're selling your lambs or goats, goats. If you're selling your goats at the stockyard and somebody else is buying them and feeding them longer, and then they may go through several different people before they're finally consumed, that all those people are going to try to get a little bit of that profit. That's what a middleman is. You know, we need to develop that business plan and identify those potential markets and produce for those markets. All too often, we end up with sheep or goats, and then we try to change our production system to fit them, and then we try to market them. We need to really start back here, figure out what the market wants, figure out what we want to produce, figure out what our resources are on the farm, and produce animals that fit. Management all starts with prevention. Biosecurity, you know, literally means to protect life. We already mentioned about buying and paying for a lot of the disease problems, resistant parasites, foot rot, caseous lymphonitis, sore mouth. The list goes on and on that we bring into our operation and expose ourselves to. We have good biosecurity in place. We work with reputable producers that we've identified that have similar interest in production systems to the way we want to produce. Then we've got a better biosecurity system. Vaccination programs, parasite control, good nutrition, early detection and treatment, calling and selection. We talk about selection. We never mention calling. It's normally felt that 20% of the animals harbor 80% of the worms in most of our flocks and herds. If we can identify those 20% of the animals and call them, we can change that parasite problem very quickly. And then predator control. You know, we've got to develop some kind of system to deal with the predators. You know, whether it's fencing, whether it's livestock guard dogs, llamas, donkeys, other protection animals, whatever it may be. But it all starts with the plan and prevention. The show ring is a great place for youth development, but it certainly causes us some issues with biosecurity. So we need to buy from those reputable breeders and know that health status. When we do, isolate those new animals for at least 30 days. The National Animal Health Sheep Report continues. This is an old one, but the updated version said the same thing. Diseases that were present, the most prevalent disease that we deal with in the United States are the parasites. Goats are especially a problem because we're changing their grazing behavior all too often. We make them graze rather than browse shrubs and brush. And all of our sheep and lambs have stomach worms, coccidia cause most of that damage. We need to get rid of the idea of controlling them simply by deworming, like Dr. Bowders talked about earlier. Utilize some rest and rotation on pasture management, alternative forages, the lesbidinas, the chicories are being promoted now as helping to alleviate some of the parasite burden. Maybe a confinement situation at certain times of the year is the best way to manage that. So, zero grazing, mixed species grazing. Mentioned genetic selection in the fecal egg counts. And then utilize the mantra system to develop that selective deworming. Our most common causes of lamb mortality are starvation. When we think about the management, we need to be prepared for lambing ahead of time. We need to have a heat box or a heat lamp and have all of our medication and tools ready before lambing season starts. We need to make sure as soon as that ewe or doe has lambs or kids, make sure they get their belly full. They consume adequate colostrum. If they don't, they're under mild hypothermia. We need to warm them up under that heat lamp or heat box. We may need to tube feed them. That's an older picture, but that's Dr. Susan Shanian tube feeding a lamb. The ice cube tray there in the middle. That's a real handy way to save some colostrum. You can milk ewes or does as you start the lambing and kidding season. Freeze it. You can take those right out of those long, narrow ice cube trays and put them right in a hot bottle, warm them up. Whenever you're thawing colostrum, you can't heat it in the microwave. You don't want to overheat it, so it's just a handy way to manage being able to heat up just enough as we need to use. If we get to severe hypothermia, then you may need to consider intraperitoneal injection of dextrose. Slowly warm that kid up and then worry about stomach tubing. When we go the other way, a lot of the calls I'm getting right now, everybody has closed everything up in the barn to try to warm it up to keep from having hypothermia and losing lambs and kids. When we get it too tight, then we have respiratory problems. If you can smell ammonia when you walk into the barn, you've got a got closed up too tight. I don't care how cold it is, you need more ventilation, or you're going to have losses and problems. The respiratory problems, ventilation isn't the only problem. Aggressive pneumonia certainly is another cause. Lungworms, nasal blots, there's lots of other diseases that cause respiratory problems. When we think about vaccination basics, we need to realize right up front that none of them are 100% effective. Any of them can be overwhelmed. We need to be vaccinating healthy animals that aren't under stress for them to be able to develop some immunity. We also need to be concerned about quality assurance kind of things and doing it in the right spot. We work with the youth quality assurance program all the time, the forage and FFA youth. Stay away from those high price cuts, give shots in the neck or the front flank where the sheep don't have any wool. Talking about vaccinations, the one thing that we recommend everyone should be vaccinating for is enterotoxemia, or breeding disease. There's lots of other vaccines available that you may consider. One that everybody needs to be doing is enterotoxemia. This vaccine isn't as effective in goats because of their higher metabolism. We really need to be boostering that 2 times in goats rather than just once. That's a product that it requires 21 to 28 day booster. With goats, we ought to do that twice, so we get a total of 3 shots in to protect. And there's certainly some other management things we can do to try to avoid sudden changes in feed. Make sure there's plenty of feeder space. Don't let the crate feeder run empty. They're going in and have free access ad-lib feeding to crate feed, and it runs out for a couple of days and you fill it back up. That's when you're going to have problems with overeating disease showing up. We have to mention nutrition in the management. Feed balanced rations according to the production cycle. Those needs are going to change dramatically. Hopefully, we are not having to provide all the nutrients they need in a confinement system all year round. We can supplement our forage when necessary to provide those nutrients they need. One thing I always throw in is water, just to remind everyone. The most critical nutrient that they need every day, and it's so common we often forget about it. But if we limit water intake, whether it's through temperature or cleanliness or lack thereof, we can limit production. When they can't drink enough water, their dry matter consumption is going to go down. They're not going to eat as much. They're not going to get the nutrients they need to be productive. We talked about the different stages of production. Nutrient needs. Dry matter intake is here on the left. TDN, or total digestible nutrients. The energy part is in the middle, and crude protein needs are across the top. For a 175-pound ewe, we consider maintenance as average. Look how much those needs increase as we talk about late gestation, lactation, with multiple births. When we're feeding a ewe that's trying to raise triplets, we've got to provide better quality feed so that she can eat enough, and we still probably aren't going to provide all her needs So we need to have her in a good body condition or expect to pull some energy and protein out of her body. She's going to lose some body condition. That's okay. That's why they have that excess fat in their body to begin with. Dry matter intake goes from 2.9 to 7.4 for maintenance to lactating and triplets, up 255%. Crude protein needs goes up 468%. So that they just cannot consume enough feed to meet their energy and protein needs. We talked about profitability and the importance of utilizing forages. One thing we may want to consider is some alternative crops. Some cool season annuals, some winter annuals, some summer annuals in the production system to extend the grazing season. This is a field of triticale. It was planted in the fall and will be available for grazing here shortly. It should pretty well provide the nutrient needs of lactating ewes. If we can get away from having to feed hay and or grain, and get them out on that forage early, and certainly affect the profitability of the enterprise. Forages and grazing are the foundation of all our ruminant livestock production, whether it be beef, cattle, sheep, or goats. So we've got to set that sustainable stocking rate, manage our forages, build and maintain soil fertility. And normally, when a lot of conferences I go to, I'll take a couple of the most important tools that I think everyone should have available to them. And a couple of them don't have anything to do with sheep and goat management. They have to do with management of forages. Forage Pro have hay analyzed, nutrient value. Soil Pro keep track of soil fertility. We need to develop some rotation grazing patterns that we can work with, yet we'll be able to manage our forages for improved production. And utilize stockpiling to get through the winter. It works great. Fescues cost more than any other forage in West Virginia. It's the best forage we got this time of year, or up until now. Questions or comments? Moving through it really quick. Yes? They can.
So then what, you just increase the protein in the feed, or you talk about the food? Because I've always thought protein was corn for the energy.
They need both. They need that energy too, but they also need more protein. So, yes, they will eat a little more, but we have to improve the protein and the energy in the feed that they are eating. Get enough nutrients into it.
Okay. That's where better quality hay than what you're feeding them.
Yes. Joe?
I'm listening to what she said. I've got a friend who feeds, let's say 25% whole corn, 25% alfalfa pellets, 25% shredded. What do you think of his ration? Of course, I wonder why we give people, you've got high protein,
Right. Well, not the oats. With the alfalfa is going to provide, but alfalfa pellets are very expensive. There's certainly other feeds that are probably more economically meet the needs of animals. Alfalfa pellets are extremely expensive in most places. in the east, we can meet the protein requirements with some soybean meal, like you mentioned, some fish meal, there are all kinds of products that we can use to balance the ration. But we've got to increase the percentage in that ration to be able to meet the needs. The animals can't eat it.
What do you think on that beef pulp?
The beef pulp is primarily a fiber that is going to help the stress of partition. Nutrient-wise, I'm not real sure it does a whole lot for providing the nutrients they need for lactation.
I harvested a field of lettuce several years ago, and a lot of lettuce put up in the barn. Those pregnant goats did very well at storing lettuce. I'll just throw that out. Of course, it has no more, no big more, it's been my experience, as I'm sure everyone here has probably 85% of your investment in sheep flock on a year-to-year basis is cheap. From putting, from your hay field to the barn, whatever you buy, off the farm, tractor supply, feed store, whatever. I can I think, $200 for a pickup load from the store, it's probably 2,200 pounds, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, yeah. The oats is not a nutrient-dense feed. It's a high-fiber feed as well, grain product as well, that certainly helps meet their nutrient needs. But normally we need to look at some corn, some soybean meal for the energy and protein in those diets. You mentioned something about 80% of the feed cost. Most of the estimates are somewhere 75 to 80% of our production costs are in winter feed costs in most cases. So one thing, back to the selection talk a little bit, one thing that we're doing, performance test station, is collecting feed efficiency data, providing residual free feed intake numbers for each animal, and we're seeing a tremendous difference in rams and goats and bulls in all the species in feed efficiency. So that's another thing that we can select for and really affect the profitability of our animal production.
Back to your protein, you were talking about a little bit better if they need it, but make sure you're balancing and not just feeding more protein because it's better. Because you're running a couple of one feed costs. Two is you can get scouring animals too much purchase. Third thing is you do it later part of gestation, it's used to birth weight, and that's a
You really need to be working with a professional, whether it is someone through the feed stores or the university system, or someone to balance those rations. There's all kinds of computer programs out there on the web now that can help you, but if you don't understand them, they can get you in trouble really quick too. So work with a professional, make sure you're feeding balanced rations. Yes? Fescue is a great feed for sheep and goats as well. Yeah. In the wintertime, after grazing, summer, when we have summer slump with cattle, we have problems with refusal from sheep and goats too. So yes, it's a problem in July and August. It certainly is. But very, very hard. Yeah. Other questions or comments?
You had a slide back there about
changed at that point at 30 days to stress them? Did it change creek? Did you do something?
Really, they weren't being creek. They weren't on the creek. They were just on mother's health when they
Okay.
were on something like that.
You know, it certainly could have been overeating disease, but it's hard to say what would cause death loss at that point. Overeating is the most common cause. So to manage that, you know, really we ought to be thinking about vaccinating the ewes and does prior to partition. Then they would provide some antibodies in their colostrum to those newborns. We could vaccinate the lambs and kids then a little bit later and get booster shots into them prior to weaning.
Encouraging raising maintain good body condition.
It can be. Depends on the forages we have available at that time of year, and with some stockpile fescue with dry ewes, even dry ewes in that last third of gestation, that fescue, stockpile fescue should pretty well meet your needs. You may need to be starting to feed a little bit of corn for a little bit extra energy during that last trimester of gestation. Certainly in lactation, energy needs are harder to meet from forages as well. But when we're matching production stage to time of year, you know, by changing nutrition, whether they lamb or kid, late spring, fall, January, certainly changes the forages that are available to provide those nutrients. Did that kind of get at what you were saying? It is a real challenge to do it with forages alone, and it amazes me that people, the differences in folks that I work with. So many want to utilize forages to their fullest extent, and that's great, but they've taken the attitude, I'm going to do this on forage, I'm not going to feed them any grain. When just a little bit of grain for a short period of time would really help meet those needs and help that production system. I don't know where you're from, but most of the conservation districts provide some cost sharing for forage sampling, that you can pull a fresh forage sample, you can pull a sample from dry hay, from whatever forage, and send off and have analyzed and utilized. When you start working on balancing a ration, you have to have those forage samples to be anywhere close to being accurate.
Got maybe time for one more question.
Any other questions, comments? Now, I'll be around if you want to catch me.
All right. I'd like to thank Brad for his time.